All right, thank you very much, Josh. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Skipper. I'm with the Greater Nashville Regional Council, and we've brought some information to present to you this evening. Before we get into that, before we introduce the mayor, just wanted to welcome everybody to the event tonight. It's pretty tremendous that you all are coming together and sharing your time with all that's going on. It's, I think, a really bright moment for the city of Gallatin in the way that you've sort of recognized some of the realities around us through the prayer vigil and the way you are demonstrating your understanding of the importance of thinking about the future, even when there is a lot going on in present day. Before we get going with the introductions for the mayor, we'd like to do a quick preview of the program we have for you today. So like I mentioned, the mayor will have some opening remarks and provide her perspective on the importance of PLANGALLATIN and your specific involvement. And then the Planning Commission Chair will introduce the city's planning team. I want to make a really big distinction in our role versus their role. We are GNRC is a regional council of governments that has existed since the 1960s to provide assistance to local governments across Middle Tennessee. I personally have been working with Sumner County since 2007 on growth and development issues. And we're really here as a technical resource as the city leadership works with its community partners and the public to think about its future. So we're here as a resource. I think it's really important that you leave here today with a really good introduction to the team of professionals that work directly for you within city government. So we'll do that. And then I'll come back and be with you for probably the longest duration of tonight's presentation and provide a glimpse into the future. As you're being asked about, what you want to see for the future in terms of policies that affect growth and development across the city. What we wanted to do is make sure you feel confident and informed well enough to be able to weigh in. So I've got some information for you this evening that I hope will be useful to you as you formulate your own thinking about the city's future. And then we'll wrap up very briefly after that larger presentation under item number 3 with a quick plug for an opportunity for you to immediately weigh in this evening with your impressions from the information that's provided. There's also another opportunity for you as you leave here this afternoon to get signed up for a small group discussion. One of the limitations of come together online is that it's sometimes difficult to facilitate large group conversations. Right now, we've got 92 folks on the line. You can imagine how difficult that might be, even with a Q&A feature that is available to you. So we have made available, and we'll provide the link near the end of the meeting, for you to sign up for smaller group discussions where you can kind of talk with your neighbors and community partners about what you're seeing in the data, forecasting Gallatin's future, and really sort of get into a real, hopefully respectful dialogue about what the options are in front of you. And then we'll want to let you know that our team will be around as long as you need us this evening. We haven't planned specifically for a Q&A session, but I know there'll be questions posed through the interface, but we will stick around as long as you need us tonight. And again, we are glad you are here. We do want, though, to make sure you have an opportunity to participate in tonight's session, despite the limitations of this large group gathering online through a webinar. And so at this point, if you could grab your cell phone, I'll give you a couple of seconds to do that. Hopefully you're not watching this on your cell phone. If you are, then probably you're savvy enough to toggle over to your iMessage or text feature. But what I'd like for you to do at this point is text mskipper999, not without the quotes, to the phone number 22333. And what that's going to do is get you signed up to participate throughout the meeting with a few questions that I've inserted in between the slides as we go along, just to take the pulse, make sure people haven't fallen asleep or get lured into their favorite television show. So please text mskipper999 to the phone number 22333 now, and this will come into play as we go out. And so just to make sure we're all on the same page, let me go ahead and test this out. So if you've done that, you've texted mskipper999, and it doesn't matter if it's uppercase or lowercase, to 22333, then show me that you've done that by answering the question that's on your screen. And that question is, what one word would you use to describe yourself? Awesome. And as you do that, you're not limited to one word, so you can keep texting words as long as that screen is open. But let's go ahead and move on to the next screen. Looks like there are a lot of dedicated and blessed folks within the city of Gallatin. Speaking of the city of Gallatin, what word comes to mind when you think of Gallatin? Be interesting to see if anybody texts this number, meaning to text somebody else, huh? All right, well, great. That's great participation. Looks like the technology is working, which is always a fear as we go into these events. So these were just warm-up questions to make sure all this was working. We're going to have some more meaningful questions, more relevant questions to the material tonight. These are very meaningful questions, I should say, as we get into it. So let me, with that, with the introductions of the technology and the agenda out of the way, what I'd like to do now is just really tell you how honored I am to introduce Mayor Paige Brown. Mayor Brown and I worked together even before she was mayor, when she was at the chamber. We go back a ways, and I've shared a lot of conversation over the years about the city's future and the challenges that it's faced with. We're very happy to have her as our vice president. So she's the vice president of the Regional Council of Governments, known as the Greater Nashville Regional Council. It is responsible for our oversight and making sure that our programming aligns to the interests of the local communities across Middle Tennessee. And she's joined by, you guys are lucky in Sumner County. Sumner County Mayor Anthony Holt is our current president. So Sumner County is represented very strongly in this 13 county regional organization. And I'm very proud of my relationship and partnership with Mayor Brown. And with that, Mayor, I'll turn it over to you for your perspective on PLANGALLATIN.
Thank you, Mr. Skipper. I appreciate the opportunity to participate with you on this as well. I particularly thank all of you who are participating this evening. You're giving up your night, and I really appreciate that, because the future of Gallatin and its plan is very, very important to all of us. We're excited that we've had more than 160 people RSVP for tonight. I'm not sure how many people are actually online, but I'm sure there are quite a few of you. And as Mr. Skipper has shared, there are good opportunities to continue the dialogue with us as we continue this process to come up with a good plan for Gallatin. It's actually it's really a tough conversation for us right now, which we in years past wasn't necessarily the case, because I can remember 13 years ago about this time, we were having multiple meetings talking about how can we attract people to our area? How can we help our businesses succeed? How can we get people to want to move here? Because we wanted to increase the prosperity of our community. And so we began working really hard to do that. Now, at the same time we were doing that, Nashville was quickly becoming a very, very popular city in our country. And as a result of both those things, I believe, our city did improve its image, and we did attract people to our area. And so I often joke, 10 years ago, we were trying to draw people here, and now we just want them to visit and go home. But the reality is that we are in a region that is growing and growing very, very fast. I wish it weren't growing as fast as it is. But that does put a challenge ahead for all of us, because we want to make sure that those who wish to live here have the opportunity to live here, and that our housing remains affordable, and that our taxes do not have to become too high for our residents to be able to pay for them. But that's the situation that we find ourselves in. And it's difficult, because I see a lot of people saying, Gallatin should not allow any more development of any land. And then I think about people. I have a little neighbor across the street from me, and she's awesome. She's 92 years old, and she has a farm in a very prime piece of real estate, I'd say. And it's where she has her chickens, and that's where she grows her garden. And I think about, she should have the same opportunity that everyone else does to sell that property whenever she needs to, and for whatever purpose someone else wants it for. I think oftentimes about the landscape around our community, and we are so blessed that so many have been able to preserve large spaces, large areas of green space, and it is what contributes so much to our scenic beauty. And I hope we have the opportunity to preserve more and more of that. But the reality remains that some some property owners can't preserve that land once they can no longer farm it, or once there's a family member that doesn't have interest in maintaining or continuing to pay for it. But that's why the conversation is really difficult at this time, because there's so many people that wish Gallatin had not changed, or wish it wouldn't change anymore. But we're looking for a place where we can make our community economically sustainable for another 200 years. This evening, we have a diverse set of people online with us. They represent a lot of the neighborhoods in our community, a lot of different professions, a lot of different areas from which they come, and a lot of different life experiences. And I think that really enriches our conversation to bring those different perspectives to this effort that we're making. You know that we would love to collaborate with you in person. Unfortunately, the virus has thrown us all for a great big loop, hasn't it? But we're doing it this way. I'm hoping the technology actually might provide some advantages that we couldn't have when we're together in person. But Plan Gallatin, as we move forward, is our city and our city council and our planning commission's commitment to engage the community as a whole in shaping the future of Gallatin. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I think it's going to help us have a plan for the next several years, like the plan that we've had for the last several, so that we can shape development in that area when those people that do have those pieces of land that they choose to sell and be developed. Community planning is not before I was mayor, but before I was very engaged in the community planning was very foreign to me. I didn't understand that there was zoning and all the things that go into planning a community. But I've learned a lot over the years. My initial opinions have actually shifted greatly from what I once thought was the right way to do things, because I understand how development patterns and design impact the bottom line for our city, and in turn impact the bottom line for our residents, which I will always care about the fiscal impact on our residents when we are talking about growth in our community. We are so fortunate that we were able to hire GNRC to help us in this exercise. GNRC is a wonderful organization that serves much of the Middle Tennessee region in a multitude of ways. They are a staff of very talented people with many disciplines of expertise, and they bring to the table a wealth of experience, education, knowledge, and provide for us something that we could not provide internally. And I think the beauty of being able to have a somewhat local organization help us do this is that they know Gallatin. In the past, we've used companies from outside of Tennessee, outside of the South. And I felt like what we had there was something not specifically authentic for our community and our character and our personality. So I think that it's a really wonderful opportunity to be able to work with an organization that has a long history with the city of Gallatin, many, many years of working for our community and understanding who we are, and ultimately through this exercise, how we think and feel and what we want for our future. And I want everyone to know that I've come to learn as an elected official in the city of Gallatin, if we don't ultimately do what your suggestion is, then you feel like we're not listening, but we have to take into consideration the opinions of everyone who's participating, and ultimately what is legal and what helps us make a better community for the city of Gallatin. So I'm very, very hopeful that we're going to get to a plan that will bring more opportunity for our community without sacrificing the character that is what makes Gallatin special and unique. So again, thank you all from the bottom of my heart. This is a commitment on your part. And I look forward to working with you all as we move forward through this. So have a good evening. I hope you do enjoy this, and I hope we all have the opportunity to learn and have great input. It's now my pleasure to pass the meeting along to the chairman of our Gallatin Planning Commission, Mr. John Pereira, who brings also great expertise to our city, and we're proud to have him serving. Mr. Pereira.
Okay, everyone, bear with me for a moment. I think we're having some problems connecting to Mr. Puryear's audio. Michael, do you want to give us a brief introduction about GNRC again for a minute while I work with John to get this going?
Sure, I would happy to stretch the time a little bit for you. So for those of you on the line online today, I just wanted to let you know that I emailed everybody about 3:30 today, just reminding you about today's meeting, and also just to just to share with you how proud we are to be working with you on this project. And I wanted to make sure you had a little bit of background information about the Greater Nashville Regional Council. And I provided a web link that's at gnrc.org. But we are a public agency, we're a government agency. We're actually owned and operated by the city and county governments across 13 counties in Middle Tennessee. We were created by the state legislature back in the 60s, about the time that the US Congress was encouraging and incentivizing metro areas of America to create similar councils of government for the purposes of leveraging federal grants, things like infrastructure, transportation, namely, economic development investments, also investments into social services. And so our role from the very beginning has been to coordinate conversation among communities across the greater metro area to come up with a shared vision for Middle Tennessee and then to pursue those federal grants. We've evolved over the years at the pleasure of our membership, City of Gallatin being an important member, to provide more resources and technical assistance to the communities who are trying to build their best future. I think one of the ways that you would appreciate, one of the things you appreciate most about GNRC, if you're not interested in all the planning and technical assistance, is we're often the gateway to the federal funding that gets invested within the city. So a lot of the transportation dollars that come into the city for roads or sidewalks are ultimately coming through our programming at the Greater Nashville Regional Council, as an example. So what I'll do there is I'll pause to see if John is with us via audio, and if he is, then we'll just turn it back over to the commissioner. John?
I believe we have audio now. Do you hear me, Michael?
I can hear you perfectly.
Very good. Sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm a little technically challenged, but well, I want to welcome everyone to the Plain Gallatin Community Conversation Series. This meeting, of course, is taking place virtually to prevent the potential spread of COVID-19 and offer the continued opportunity for public input into the planning process. This meeting is part of the continuing effort by the city to develop a new comprehensive plan for Gallatin, as you know. The current comprehensive plan was adopted by the Gallatin Municipal Regional Planning Commission back in 2009, and it certainly needs to be updated. As you are probably aware, the Gallatin City Council adopted a strategic plan for our city in June of 2018, establishing a community vision and identifying strategic goals and commitments with priority actions. One of those actions being the update to the comprehensive plan. We call this process Plan Gallatin. Tonight's virtual meeting is just one of more than 10 sessions over the past year to gather input from the public, as well as the Planning Commission and the City Council. The last public participation meeting was held back in February, before the world turned upside down. It included a scenario planning exercise where the public was asked to view and discuss several different development trends, including a sprawl trend, you've heard of urban sprawl, or a compact growth trend, or just the status quo, doing things like we've always done it. The public also identified areas in and around the city appropriate for development with a range of densities, as well as areas that they preferred to see no development at all. Now, we're now moving to the community preference stage of the planning process, where we encourage public input on preferred development patterns and design aspects that you, the public, would like to see included in the plan. Tonight's meeting is just one step. At the end, we'll ask you to sign up for breakout sessions to be held in the next 2 weeks, and we'll also ask you to fill out a survey about this session. So please don't leave early. Now, on a personal note, I'd like to kind of go off script and tell you that I'm very excited about this comprehensive plan process and the all-inclusive approach that the city leaders have taken to this. There is a backstory to this issue which I would like to share with you tonight. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission adopted a comprehensive plan back in 2009, and I was part of that process. With the help of an outside consultant and a great deal of time and effort on the part of the planning staff and the Planning Commission members, we worked for over a year to develop a very comprehensive plan document, parts of which will be carried forward into this current plan that we're undertaking. The several hundred-page finished product which the consultant delivered to us represented the fruits of our labor for the previous 12 months. And at that time, we were presented with two choices. We could either send the document forward to City Council for their review and adoption, or for the Planning Commission to simply approve it ourselves and allow it to serve as a guide for our planning process and decision-making, essentially a roadmap to where we wanted to go. This was not nearly as easy a decision as it might appear on the surface. Sending this to the City Council risked overwhelming them with a staggering amount of information and sudden changes. They would have to digest in a very short period of time what we, the Planning Commission, had slowly digested over the course of more than a year. The risk was that the comprehensive planning document, which we had worked so hard on, would be subjected to the political process and would unravel through piecemeal revisions to the point that it became disjointed and possibly ineffective. However, without sending it to the council for adoption, the plan would not become ordinance and would only serve as a guidebook for the Planning Commission to follow while making recommendations to the City Council. I have to confess that we made the wrong decision. We chose not to send it to the City Council for adoption back in 2009, and the Planning Commission simply approved it for our own internal use. This failure on our part has created several problems over the past decade. In hindsight, I realize now that the problem wasn't that we didn't trust our City Council to make the right decisions. It was that we didn't trust the process that had been put in place. If we had sent that document to them for approval, we would have been setting our city leaders up for failure because the process did not involve getting proper input from the public. So I want to applaud the leadership of Gallatin, Mayor Brown, and the Gallatin City Council for the wonderful approach they've taken to this current planning process. They've worked very hard to gather input and vision from all the stakeholders so that the finished product will be the vision of the entire community. The City Council is already committed to adopting the final plan. They're comfortable in making this commitment because they've been integral to the process from the very beginning, and they already know that the finished product will represent the wishes of the citizens of Gallatin. This is how government is supposed to work, and it reinforces my belief that we have great leadership in our community, and we have wonderful staff and planning staff. We all know that growth is coming to our area. The planning process is the way we can harness and channel that growth to create a positive outcome. I believe that everyone participating in this process tonight wants the same thing. We want to create a community full of opportunity, which our children and grandchildren choose to also call home. We can grow while still continuing to be the nicest place in America. And you can see we have a wonderful staff that is supporting this whole process. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Michael Skipper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, for that. I think it's pretty big of you to sort of tell that history and how it informed your approach this time around. We appreciate your leadership on the Planning Commission and have a lot of confidence in this partnership. Thank you for that. All right, everybody. So hopefully we've kept you with us. We've got 99 attendees online, which is fantastic. I think we broke the triple-digit mark just a minute ago. So hopefully somebody just went to get water and they're coming right back. What I have for you this evening is a set of slides. Some of you, there's probably a handful of you on the call today have probably seen this more than you like. I do want to promise you that what we have for you this evening is more than you've seen before. And what's coming in the next few days, next couple of weeks, is much, much more than what you've experienced before. A lot of what we have for you this evening was ready to go March 12th as part of an in-person workshop where we were going to be able to roll up our sleeves with each one of you and really get our hands dirty in terms of thinking about the growth and development patterns for the city. It's an important job and you should be part of it. But one of the things that I've recognized over my career is that, and this kind of speaks to some of what John said earlier, is that plans are only as successful as the public that's involved in its development. And what I know, just based on that experience and talking with people that have gone through it or have hesitated to go through the process, is they always feel confident in their opinions. You know, they feel like they're shooting from the hip and they don't know if that's good enough to participate in this process. And so our role really is to bridge the information gap and give you some resources to feel confident to fully engage in this process and to really kind of stand behind your opinions. But also it's to challenge some of your preconceived notions about policy and the way the city is growing. Often what we find, and this is not limited to Gallatin, Middle Tennessee, Tennessee, or the US, that our own sort of inherent attitudes toward growth are often counterintuitive to the outcomes that we experience. That's a philosophical conversation I'd love to get in with any one of you who's interested. But it's sort of true. Like the way we think about growth and development is sometimes misguided because we think certain things will happen and the opposite ultimately happens in reality. And so really the point of our presentation this evening is to increase your knowledge base of the relationship between a planning process and the planning policies that result from it and the outcomes on your quality of life. Now, the obvious reason we're here together is that Gallatin is growing. I think everybody who has spoken so far on the call has said this 3 or 4 different times, but let's put some numbers behind that. Gallatin is growing. It's growing at 200 people per month. And that's been the trend over the last few years. It's a consistent trend. Not only are you growing, as the mayor said, you're growing within a very fast growing metro area. And the way that metro area is growing around Gallatin will also have an influence on your quality of life. And this is something that we can think about together as we go through data and analytics, as we get in deeper into the process through other activities that we'll have planned for you. But Gallatin is growing, and often in the planning process, a community pauses to debate whether or not we should grow. Well, the reality is that's not really a choice that can be made. It's not any of our choice whether or not the city will grow. The city will grow. Your choice is best served to influence how you grow and in which ways you grow through the targeted strategies you have to attract what it is that you want to the city of Gallatin while also preserving what you already like about it. So the question about growth isn't such a debate about whether it will or won't happen. If you're successful with your, if you have a successful economy and an attractive place to live, you will grow. If you don't have those things, that's likely the only recipe to not growing. So the question is, how should you grow? And that's what we want to bring to the table this evening is a conversation about some of the trade-offs that exist within certain sets of decisions that you can make about your future. Because the city has recognized the importance of community engagement, they launched the Plan Gallatin initiative. PLANGALLATIN.org is the website for you to go to access most of what I'm talking about tonight, but all of the material that we prepared throughout the process. I won't dwell on this, but this is your gateway to the process for future events and meetings, but also some of the data and the previous comments that have been shared. I know that's already been a question in the Q&A this evening. So PLANGALLATIN.org is your clearinghouse and the name of the initiative. So let's, as we get into, before we lose everybody to their favorite TV show, let's do an audience participation poll. Let's ask you, how have you been involved in Plan Gallatin up to this point? You've got 3 choices, and I'll read them to you just in case you're having a hard time seeing the screen. Choice A is that you've participated in Plan Gallatin workshops, meetings, or surveys, any one of those. Choice B is that you've been following, you're aware of it, but you haven't really actively participated yet until today. And choice C is that you're just now learning about the process. And there are no right, they're all right answers. There are no wrong answers. So even if you're just joining us for the first time today, there's plenty of opportunity to shape ultimately the policies that come as a result of Plan Gallatin. All right, thank you for that. Let's see, we've got quite a few of you that are still paying attention. That's awesome. One quick reminder, what we're doing through Plan Initiative isn't setting out to develop a new plan. It's really to update your current comprehensive plan that was adopted back in 2009. And we poll the community, by and large, most folks know it existed, but a lot of folks weren't involved in the development of the plan. And that speaks to some of the concerns that John represented as to their lack of confidence of forwarding it on to the city council. So just a reminder, Plan Gallatin is an update to Gallatin on the Move 2020, which is available in its entirety on the city's website. So as we look at Plan Gallatin, I like to think of it as really three distinct but related activities with the community. Step one is a listening step, where we go out and we listen to your vision and the expectations you have for the place that you want to live in into the future. This is a process that we went through last year that largely culminated in a town hall back in October, where we presented the results of that. And I'm going to give you some direction on how to access that. We continue to reinforce and validate that. So we haven't stopped listening, but we've taken that information to get into step two. Step two is really where we are now and what we'll be talking about the rest of the evening. And step two, I like to call the brainstorming. So we've listened to your vision and your expectations for the city. Now we brainstorm on the best way to get there. So that's step two. Then step three is, once we get a general sense of the direction that you want to go and how to get there, we begin to develop the plan document, which would put forth the specific strategies, policies, and guidance for the city, the developers, and the community at large, so that it can implement that vision. So it's a three-step process. We're in step two now. Speaking of step one, like I said, this culminated in a town hall event back last October, results of which can be found at plangallatin.org. But this was the result of several inputs with the public, online surveys being a key ingredient to that, but several workshops. It started with a lawn party in front of City Hall back in the summer, and just you can see there on the bottom left-hand side of the map, we pinned the location of the folks who had provided input through that listening session. So pretty good representation across the entire city in terms of representing diversity in neighborhoods. And also the demographics and socioeconomic makeups of the community itself. From that process, what we learned was that there were really 6 themes that were important to you. And this is a very high-level overview of those themes. But one is you wanted planned growth. Sometimes governments question themselves in terms of the community's appetite for intentional and planned growth through public policy. And this is something that you said that you wanted. You want efficient transportation systems, you want economic opportunity, but you also want to preserve natural beauty, and you want to protect that sort of the community-focused aspects of Gallatin. And as I told the city leadership through this process, as we've done work across Middle Tennessee, I've never heard residents and businesses describe their place with such words of passion than Gallatin did. I mean, this is a place that's very proud of who you are, and you don't want to lose that. And then ultimately, the 6th issue was a desire to have defining places. So people know when they've arrived in Gallatin, either because of gateways or nice buffers between you and the rest of the world that's operating around you. So again, all this information is plangallatin.org, and is really the setup for tonight's conversation around scenario planning. So what is scenario planning? What I'd like to describe scenario planning as is a time machine. So what allows you to do is to hop in a time machine, zoom into the future to see the results of the series of decisions that you made along the way to get there. Gives you a moment and a space of safety to sort of judge yourself. How well did you do making decisions along the way? So that's what scenario planning is. What we bring to the table is a series of relatively sophisticated tools that can forecast future conditions and quality of life based on some assumptions for how you've decided to grow along the way. Tonight's conversation is going to show you how you're currently trending towards the future. And then we're going to compare that, the results of that future against 2 what-if scenarios. And so that's, in a nutshell, what scenario planning is. It's an opportunity for you to look into the future and see what the results were in terms of the trade-offs between the objectives that you're trying to achieve. When I say that, I mean things like traffic congestion and walkability, land consumption, and fiscal impact. The mayor talked earlier about there's a lot of folks in the community who want to preserve open space. There's a lot of people who own open space who want to preserve their ability to sell that land. And I think we could all agree it's not the city government's role to tell people they can't sell their land. It doesn't mean that the goal to preserve open space and natural vistas and the rural character that you like as surrounding and intersecting the city shouldn't be preserved. So how do we best approach that without telling people that they can't sell their land? So we can look at certain decisions for strategies for protecting land to see how well we would do with those strategies and with the benefit of being able to make a different decision if we don't like that outcome. All right. So tonight, as we get into a look at these different scenarios for the city's growth, which are very much hypothetical, except for the one that we're projecting into the future currently based on current policies, one important thing that I like to point out is that as we look to the year 2045, if you see here, we're forecasting a 55% increase in the population within the urban growth boundary. And if you're not familiar with the urban growth boundary, that's okay. Just think of it as like a buffered area between the city limits and the unincorporated parts of the county that you've sort of telegraphed to the rest of the county that you intend to grow into over the long term, either through annexations or just adjacent development. So urban growth boundary is sort of like the immediate area outside the city that, you know, is sort of ultimately going to be your footprint. And when you look across that area, which is usually, you know, what most people think of the city of Gallatin anyway, a lot of folks don't know where the city limits stop. 55% increase in the population is pretty significant. We're also forecasting a more than a doubling of the employment within that area. And so these numbers they're hefty. They're big numbers for a lot of people, but they're not outlandish. This is still within the bounds of the recent trends that you've experienced here. So this is a lot of people, a lot of jobs to plan for. The scenarios that we're going to present to you tonight are all fixed on that population employment, so we can isolate the impacts to quality of life of just the different development patterns. How would you rearrange those people and jobs differently to achieve better or worse outcomes? And so that's one thing I want to keep in mind as we go through this. We're going to look at a snapshot of 2010. So I'm going to show you the development pattern back in 2010. I'm going to show that to you for today, and I'm going to project forward to the 2045 year, which sounds like it's far into the future, but it's really not. It's as close to us. It's 1995 is backwards. It doesn't feel that far away, to me at least. So we're going to show you where you're headed based on your current policies and the way the market is reacting to those policies. So it's the sort of trend that you're on right now, not really a debatable sort of forecast. Then we're going to compare the outcomes of that trend to two what-if scenarios that represent different philosophies for growth that we know exist within this community and exist within other communities. Some people naturally gravitate to places that are lower density and a much more sprawling development pattern, while others feel more attracted to places that are compact and walkable. So we've provided a glimpse into the future if you were to pursue sort of both of those philosophies independently, sort of in their extreme versions, to inform you about the impacts that they would have on key metrics that shape your quality of life. One thing I want to be clear about as we get into it, and I promise you, my part of this is almost done. The next few slides go relatively quickly. None of these are ultimately what you're going to be choosing from. You're going to use this as information to guide your opinion about how the city should grow, but it's not a discrete choice between A, B, and C. Ultimately, the plan is going to be built around a preferred growth scenario that we construct with you that's influenced by the more academic look at the extremes on either side of your current trend. So again, this is not a choice that we're asking you to make tonight. It's just trying to improve your level of knowledge about the impacts that growth and development have on what you say is important to you. Okay, so with that, let's talk about density, because you can't really talk about the future scenarios that are in front of us without really recognizing that the number one indicator of that pattern is expressed through density, which is just essentially, you know, a level of it's a value that represents the number of people or jobs over over the space, right? So on this legend, we've got population per square mile, and you see the density categories there. And most of the maps that I have for you tonight are going to be color coded. The darker the red, the higher the density. The deeper the green, the lower the density. And by the way, before I move on from this, here you see the urban growth boundary that I was talking about earlier. Here you see the current municipal boundary. Let me point out a couple of roadways. This is 386. Hopefully you can see my mouse on the screen, but this is 386 here. This is US 31. This is the 109 bypass meeting up with 109 here, just to get yourself oriented with the geography. So a lot of the maps I have are going to be represented through these color codes. Again, that's a look at that. So what does density look like? Because it's really, I think, more important that you understand what this looks like in sort of visual form than trying to remember the numbers. You know, rural, when we talk about rural, we're really talking about one house every 5 to 10 acres. Very low density, we're talking about one house every 2 to 5 acres. You can see some pictures that represent that environment. Low density, so when you see this yellow color, we're talking about one house for every 1 to 2 acres. That orange is representing one house per acre, which is usually like in a metro area like we live in, the predominant form of development, that medium density orange line. The elevated density, not really high density, I don't think most people consider this high density, is 1 to 2 households per acre. So half-acre lots. And then high density is expressed typically for development pattern that's, you know, a third of an acre lot from a residential standpoint. And of course, we think about density both in a residential and an employment or commercial standpoint. But I want to make sure as you look at the maps and you see the colors that you have a visual cue in your head as to what that is. Nothing we're presenting this evening, even the high density, is sort of not already seen somewhere within the city limits. It's just maybe taking your most dense spots and spreading that out over a larger area to expand that compact footprint. So anyway, so that's a look at the color coding to the maps that I have for you tonight. This is all be available on the website for you to study further. But let's stop here for a quick audience participation question. So what is your best guess for the residential density where you live? Okay, and you know, a lot of you, if you live in the city, you're not likely to pick A or B, but there are some neighborhoods or homes in a rural context within the city limits. But I imagine that we have folks joining today who are just outside the city limits and very interested in the path that the city takes with its development pattern. Okay, so we've got, you know, folks living in that medium density, elevated and high density represented on the call this evening, and that makes sense. There are more people on those areas if you think about it, right? Okay, so let's move on. We've got some more questions along the way. Again, there's a map key, so if you want to study these later, you can have at it and ask us questions again. But let's get into the maps. And like I said, this is the home stretch. So the trend analysis, let me show you some maps that represent where you are today as a way of introducing a few key concepts. And so what you're looking at is Sumner County, and then the urban growth boundary is generally located within that red box on the screen. This is the development pattern across Sumner County today. The white areas are places where you've got development already occurring on the landscape. So this is like a useful structure, like a commercial warehousing, a house, an apartment complex. So the white is where you're developed today, and we're going to come back to this trend here in a second. This is Sumner County looking at the residential density. These colors relate to the color codes that I mentioned earlier. And this is the employment today. You see employment is largely focused in very specific areas, not nearly as spread out as the residential density is across the county. All right, so those are the types of data we're going to be looking at as we go through this progression. Let's focus on the development trend. I'm going to stay at the county level for this because I think you can pick up on the pattern a little bit better. But this is where you were in 2010. Again, the white is where you're seeing developed properties. This is 2010, this is today, and this is where you're headed through 25 based on those current policies and the way the market is reacting to this. And so today and into the future. So quite a bit of expansion of the developed properties into those rural areas across the county. Let's look at your residential trend. I'm going to zoom in here to the urban growth boundary so you can see Gallatin a bit better. So this is the residential density in 2010. And again, you got 386 here, you've got US 31 here, State Route 109 bypass here. Residential density 2010, this is today. So you've definitely gotten a little bit more dense since 2010 and spread out a little bit more than you were a decade ago. And then this is where you're headed by the year 2045. So a pretty significant expansion of your footprint as a city and continued density around the core. But you still have within the urban growth boundary areas that remain low density, very low density, and rural. So that's a look at your residential trend into the future. Let's look at your employment trends. This is employment locations by density in 2010. This is today. And this is into the future. So you've got some new employment centers that are expected to pop up. Some of them already are popping up through the efforts of the Gallatin EDA and other economic and community development partners that have been able to attract jobs into the community. You can see that where those places have popped up over the years there. All right, so that's your employment trend. So what I'd like to do though is combine people and jobs to give you an overall sense of densities across the city. This is 2010. Today, you see that expansion, and then this is into the future. Pretty significant expansion. Almost, you're starting to lose some of that rural landscape according to the trajectory that you're on now. All right, so that's a look into the future. And like I said, we're not going anywhere. So if you have any questions about how we do these forecasts, we're happy to answer them. But what I want to do so that we can get you through this evening is kind of focus on, well, what's the impact of the trend that you're on? So we have not only a model that forecasts the development pattern that you're trending towards, but it can translate that into a measure of the way the community will demand services or consume open space or generate traffic. And so we've got a range of measures here. These are all things that folks said were important to them through the listening session. And then between today and in the future, 2045, whether these things get better or worse. And you're going to want to spend some time with this to digest it better. But I guess the point here is that, if you think traffic congestion is bad now, and we all know this is a relative thing, bad congestion to one person is great congestion to another. But we know that as you grow into the future, you're going to become more congested. And our models predict that you're going to be driving about 10% more miles per person over where you are today. And as a result, you're going to see a significant increase in the number of those miles that you're driving in congested conditions. Now, this is a big number because the way our models work relative to the rest of the region, you have a pretty good baseline right now. You've got some hot spots, but it's not widespread congestion yet. It's more time of day, bottleneck type stuff across the city. But if you don't really address the transportation challenges, that is definitely going to change into the future. Because you are growing a little bit more compact, you'll see some increased walkability. So that's what this green number represents. It's sort of a positive movement in the right direction. But you see the walk to parks and walk to schools, the amount of time it takes you to get to those things is going to go down because your footprint is also expanding, right? So you're going to need to think about additional park access and where the schools are placed in proximity to that growing population. There's some other measures here, residential water and energy use. These things begin to go way up into the future based on your current trends. And the things that we need to be thinking about that are directly impacted by the development pattern that you're trending along. The last two measures I think are really important for a lot of people. Some of these are, it's hard to get everybody on the same page in terms of translation here. These are easy to translate. So what we're saying is between today and 2045, you're going to consume about 38% of all the available prime ag land that's within the urban growth boundary. So that's pretty significant. Once you convert that land, it's gone. The other available greenfield, so it's not prime ag land, but it's just open space, natural sort of landscapes. You're going to lose 26% of that between now and the future based on the current trajectory. So, we're kind of giving you a sense of what this is going to look like. So if this is bothersome to you, you could speak up and try to get those numbers to be lower through your input. So this is a report card that we use to measure the differences and impacts between the different scenarios that you might want to consider into the future. I'm going to come back to this as a sort of a final thought here in a bit, but let me introduce the two different philosophies that we've tested so you can see the general impact that they have on your trend. So the what if scenario number one that we're going to look at is this sprawling philosophy. The second is a compact growth philosophy. But before I get to that, you guys still with me? Text A if you think this stuff is interesting, text no if you're Take B if you think it's boring. That's fair. Oh, that's fair. That's fair. All right. People are getting peer pressured out of B. All right. I guess you wouldn't be answering C if that was true. So okay. Well, I'm glad you're finding this interesting. There's a lot more to it than the slides that I'm presenting today. So let's move on and look at these scenarios that we've prepared for you. So just a reminder, when I say current trend for the year 2045, I'm projecting your current policies and how the market, the development community and property owners are responding to that policy and what it will look like in the year 2045, right? This, just a reminder of that pattern, right? The sprawl philosophy, and there's no implication here that this is bad. Sometimes sprawl is a negative connotation, but that's not the case here. Some people think that lower density and more spread out development is the right path to take. So this is predominantly low density residential at the 1 to 5 acre lots in the places that are currently undeveloped. So we're testing that scenario with what I'm going to show you. And this is what that would look on the map, like on the maps. We told the model, right, allocate growth based on that constraint of distributing according to those parameters. And this is what it looks like. And of course, visually, what you see is that if you don't allow some density to occur in your undeveloped areas, you're going to be spreading out, well beyond the city limits, which, as the mayor said, could put a strain on your resources as you have to sort of pull in these adjacent properties to provide them service, almost all the way out to the urban growth boundary there. But so that's a look at the sprawl that we're testing, the sprawl philosophy. The compact philosophy is, like I said, some people just think that the better way to grow is through walkable neighborhoods, right? More opportunity for mixed use development near existing centers and preferred corridors. And the way we created this for the testing purposes for you this evening is that through the listening sessions, we were able to identify where the participants in the process said it made the most sense to grow. So this isn't our version of compact. You told us, like, these are the parts of the city where we should grow, and then we allowed the model to put more of that population and employment we were talking about earlier, because these are all the same people and jobs, put more of that within a compact footprint. So this is a visual representation on that, where you can see the same number of people and jobs are closer into the places that you've already invested in the existing neighborhoods. So I won't make any value judgment here. That's your role, but there's a clear difference in the development pattern that results from these two philosophies. They do also have an impact on those metrics that I talked about earlier, and I'm going to share that with you here in a second. But just a reminder, we're looking here in a bit at how the sprawl philosophy is going to compare to the trend, and how the compact philosophy is going to compare to the trend. We're not comparing sprawl versus compact. We're just comparing each of them individually back to the trend, which is the year 2045 on the path that you're currently headed. So back to that scorecard, I'm going to add 2 more columns to that. And you're familiar now with this column, right? And I've added these 2 columns. This is comparing the sprawling philosophy to the trend and the compact philosophy to the trend. And the way to read this, again, I welcome you to take a look at this with some additional time so you can come up with your questions. But what this is saying is that, I said earlier that between now and where you're headed, you're going to see about a 9% increase in the distances that you are driving on a daily basis per capita. If you choose, or if you grow according to the sprawl philosophy, it's likely to be 14% more than that 9%, right? So if you think 9% is bad, it's going to be 14% more distance that you're traveling per capita on a daily basis to get to where you need to go. But if you grow using a generally compact philosophy, you're actually going to see some improvement over the current trend. So if you're driving 9% more in the future based on where you're headed, you'll get 4% better if you grow differently. So without doing anything with infrastructure, right? This is all the same infrastructure, all the same number of people and jobs. The development pattern itself is leading to these outcomes because that pattern is driving consumer behaviors and choice and sort of your experiences and demand for infrastructure and services. And so that's an example of how to read this. We'll say that VNT in congestion, let's just call this traffic congestion so we don't have to worry about the acronyms. Traffic congestion gets a lot worse between now and in the future. If you use a sprawling philosophy, it's going to get 5% worse than that even. But if you use a compact growth philosophy, you can improve your traffic congestion. The models estimate by 13% just through the development pattern that you've created for yourself. Now, we're going to be investing in transportation infrastructure along the way as well. So hopefully the improvement is much greater than that if you make good choices about infrastructure. But I'm wanting to show you sort of the influence that the development pattern and location has on the things that you say are important to you. And then I'll skip down here because I know we're getting kind of late on time. Look at the differences that are achieved through the open space measures. Just like I said, this is really important to a lot of people. A lot of people really said they really like the natural environment around the city and within the city. That's one thing we hear a lot of. We hear a lot about historic preservation as well, not losing some of those historical assets within the core of the city in terms of districts and buildings as well. But anyway, back to this. So if you, between now and the future, you're going to consume 38% of your prime ag, you're going to consume half of it if you take this route. You're going to only consume 9% of that land into the future if you grow through a more compact philosophy. So I think you get the point. The development pattern that you choose, and you are choosing it, the policies that you put into place will have an influence, maybe not on how fast you grow, but certainly how you grow. So that's what you can manage. You can manage how you grow, and how you grow as a result of those choices are going to impact your quality of life with or without additional investments in infrastructure. I'd argue if you don't invest in infrastructure, it's going to get much worse, but you don't always have to pick up a shovel to improve your situation. Sometimes it is about decision-making along the way. Okay, so that's the information we wanted to share with you this evening. In a minute, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague at GNRC, Brad Baumgartner, to give you an immediate opportunity this evening to tell us how you feel about what I just shared with you. And any initial impressions that you had. But before I do that, I got second to last audience participation question for you is, what one or two words describes how you feel about the information that we just presented? Well, that's a good first word. Yeah, a lot of diversity in sort of how we think about this. Somebody got at their thesaurus. All right, okay. Informative, excited, so there's some anxiety there, but there's also a lot of excitement. So I think what we have here, it's demonstrated through just this word cloud, is that I think you've got the right energy to talk with each other about these decisions that are going to be brought to your table. So with that, let's talk about how to further engage. Brad, would you like to talk a little bit about this opportunity we have for them that's live right now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael. And again, good evening, everyone. My name is Brad Baumgartner. I'm a principal planner here at GNRC. At this stage, we would like to formally invite all of you to give your feedback about the direction that you would like to see Gallatin take. We have provided the survey link here on the screen, and we've created the survey to be as quick and painless as possible. So if each and every one of you could fill out the updated survey with your immediate feedback to what we've talked about and discussed tonight, it would be incredibly helpful so that we can hear your voice in this process and the choices that are available to you. I know myself and everyone here, the City of Gallatin and GNRC, we want to thank you all so much for your time and being a part of helping Gallatin choose its path forward into the future. And now I'd like to introduce Rosemary Bates, Special Projects Director with the Gallatin Economic Development Agency, who I know works tirelessly to really improve the economic well-being and prosperity of Gallatin. Rosemary?
Hey, thank you very much, Brad. I appreciate that. Just a little bit about me. I'm a transplant to Gallatin from East Tennessee, but I've lived here more than 30 years. My first home was in the historic district, so I'm passionate about historic preservation and understand that can't always happen, and we've had some sad losses for that because of that. But also I'm in the Economic Development Agency, and our charge here is to grow the job base, but also grow wages, and that's what we are efforting to do. I'm introducing to you at this point what we're going to be doing toward after this meeting is we would like for you to sign up for breakout sessions. Those are not going to be held tonight. They're on different dates over the next coming weeks, 2 weeks at different times. And those are small group activities. At the most, there will be 2 facilitators and 8 attendees in those breakout groups. And in those breakout groups, it's very interactive. You're not going to get 45 minutes of everybody talking at you without you having an opportunity to respond. These are you participating in mapping exercises and sharing other information and specifically looking at parts of town. For example, there's been some questions raised about land preservation. Well, where do you want that to happen? Where might you want new parks to be? Where might you want more dense development and less dense development? Where might you want another business district? Those are all the activities in those breakout sessions, and they are small groups for a purpose because we want to hear from everyone in those groups and we want it to be interactive. So please take time after this session tonight to go on and sign up for one of those groups. If you try for a group and it's filled up, just try for another one. If you ultimately end up where there isn't a group or time that works for you, let us know and we will work something out for you. But please continue to participate in the process. It is not over and public input has not ended. It's getting more intense, actually. So hang in there with us, and we very much appreciate you paying attention and being passionate about Gallatin like we are.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. Thank you, Brad. Let me repeat those 2 URLs. They're very simple: plangallatin.org/survey and then /RSVP to sign up for your small group discussion. That is live now. And there is an opportunity, as Rosemary said, that if one of those time slots doesn't work for you, or if your favorite slot filled up before you got to it, there is a place for you to request some additional times, and we'll do everything we can to accommodate that. So the last thing that we have for you today really is just an open invitation to stick around with us for any questions that you might have, which leads me to the final audience participation opportunity for this evening is, are you interested in doing that? If you are, we will stick around. If not, this will help us know if we need to hop off or not. And if you haven't been able to participate in this text to poll yet, it needs to be reminded of the instructions. It's pretty simple. Just grab your cell phone and text to the phone number 22333, the word mskipper999. So text mskipper999 to the phone number 22333, and you see that up there at the top of the slide. Once you've done that, it's going to confirm that you're registered, and then you can text A or B to select your choice here. But again, we thank you for your time this evening. Apologize for going over late. Also apologize that these big webinars are very difficult to sort of facilitate group conversation, which is why I commend the city for setting up these small group discussions. It's pretty unique. A lot of governments are trying to figure out how best to continue conversations with their residents through COVID-19, through that context, and not a lot have figured that out and how to do that productively. And I think I'm really proud of the city staff and our staff at GNRC for the design that they came up with to give you some opportunities to participate, even if you're doing that from home in your pajamas. Probably even a little bit more creative than you would be if you were sitting at City Hall in the basement at a workshop. So again, thank you for being here. Looks like there's some interest in us sticking around. We'll do the best we can to answer these questions. If we can't answer them today, we'll definitely get back to you. I'll email the group, those who RSVP today, with a follow-up. With that, I'd just like to see if Mayor Brown has any final words before so we cut loose on the formalities and get into the Q&A.
Sure, I'll say just a couple of things. I appreciate the participation today. Appreciate the presentation. I hope it offered some better understanding for folks about kind of the challenges that we face. I've been looking at your questions, trying to see them both on Facebook and also on this forum. And I understand the different feelings that are out there. and the challenges before us. So thank you all. We look forward to coming up with this plan. I'll say I wish the city of Gallatin could buy every bit of available land out there and make beautiful parks all over our city. But that would certainly be a tax impact that I don't think any of our residents would be very supportive of. I am pleased that we were able to add some more land to our park system this year, and I hope that we can continue to do that in the future. But we also are going to continue to need new development. And Michael, you may have touched on this. I had to get on one phone call, but we have to have those opportunities for our children and grandchildren to come back to this community if they so desire. And if we don't have housing available, then our housing prices will not only not afford that opportunity for those people, it will force a lot of people to move from our community, and we certainly don't want that too. We want people who love calling Gallatin home to be able to continue to call Gallatin home. And I mentioned at the beginning of this that 13 years ago we were trying to figure out how to draw people here, and it occurred to me, I wonder how many participating this evening have moved here in the last 13 years. So I wish that was a question we'd actually included, and that might be something that we look at in the future. Oh, I think it's on that survey that you have out there. So that would answer it for us. So I'm glad you are all here in our community, and I do hope you continue to find it a good place to live. And as we look towards the future in this growing region, let's all work together to make Gallatin the best it can be. So thank you. Hope you all have a wonderful night, and we'll look forward to seeing you as we continue the process.
Thank you very much, Mayor. At this point, I'll just turn it back over to Josh, our moderator / operator for this evening, to facilitate the Q&A. And our staff is available, city planning staff is available. Again, just thanks to everyone for your time this evening. Thank you, Mayor Brown, for being with us. I know you've had a big day already. Rosemary, Brad, Mary, Michelle, the whole team. So Josh, with that, you have the floor for Q&A.
Sure. One of the first questions we got in was from Rebecca. Rebecca, I've unmuted your line, but her question was, she lives at the end of Lock 4 Road. There's a wonderful park at the end of it. The wonderful park at the end is awful and terrifying. Why is there not a multi-purpose path along Lock 4 for safe access for walkers, runners, and cyclists? So this is a question that we see quite often, and it talks about specific infrastructure, but also city plans to expand multimodal opportunities across the city. And Michael, and I think Bill's also on the line along with the mayor. So is there anything in the plan that talks specifically about multimodal access?
Josh, this is Rosemary. I can answer a little bit about that situation. One of the first items that Councilman Jimmy Overton, who at that time represented that area, and he may still, I just don't remember where his boundaries are right now. He felt very strongly that we needed to widen Lock 4 Road all the way down to the park and add multimodal opportunities. There was an initial plan that was drafted. The challenge with that plan is it would require the acquisition of lots of private property. There is not enough right-of-way there to widen the road and add any multimodal walking or biking paths. That plan has not been thrown in the trash by any stretch of the imagination. But it honestly has gone down the list because of the cost it would take to acquire all the property. And if one person said no, then you would have to take them to eminent domain. And that is really distasteful to many people and it's just very distasteful. So I think it's a great question that you've asked. I think that I'm hoping that it will still be included in the plan. I believe it will. When the city can afford to do that, that's the next question.
I will make the observation that for anyone that wants to go to Lock 4 Park, other than in a car, it is maybe one of the most frightening experiences on the planet. It is a terrifying, terrifying road to walk, bike, or ride.
This is Bill McCord, the city planner. I want to also point out that the Gallatin on the Move plan, our current comprehensive plan, does indicate the city's long-term interest in developing a greenway pathway from essentially the central portion of the city to Lock 4 Park. And it has an alignment that's a little bit different than Lock 4 Road. It would extend generally through virgin territory that's partly not in the city at this time. But as new development occurs, and including the Cumberland North development, we are having them plat easements along various portions of their subdivisions to be able to accommodate that greenway consistent with the current comp plan. We also have a pretty extensive list, and we can make that available to the public on our website, but we also maintain that with engineering of various roadways, and many of them are collector roadways, including Lock 4 Road, where we have identified a priority need for sidewalks. Obviously, funding those and some of the issues that Rosemary brought up create a lot of challenges for us. But we are working through, like, for example, the MPO to identify funding sources that will help the city accomplish some of those goals. And you may have seen some sidewalks that are being put in various places. Some of those are using grant funds from the state and or the MPO to help the city achieve that a little quicker. It's a mammoth project to make up for lost time, if you will, over the years that we didn't do these things. But we certainly are aware of those. And I agree with you completely, because I live over off Lock 4 Road and bicycle and walk and used to run before my knees gave out on me about the challenges that we face throughout the city in providing connectivity. But it's extremely important, and it needs to be, in my opinion, at least, a strong component of infrastructure planning.
Thank you.
And I'll jump in too and say something in addition. I think, Mr. McCord, we actually did apply for a grant to at least begin the process of putting a sidewalk down that road, but I don't think we were successful in that. One of the things that I'm in, and I was also going to add that on Lock 4, there's also the issue of a couple of bridges, which of course makes it much more expensive to be able to widen and provide pedestrian access. But one of the things that I've long been interested in is creating a neighborhood sidewalk program where, say, a street of neighbors all decide that they want a sidewalk on their street, and they sign and agree that they want the sidewalk there, and we'll donate that land for us to put the sidewalk in. Then that would certainly put it at a higher priority on our list, because then we're not worrying about acquiring the land for the sidewalk. We are just paying the cost of actually installing the sidewalk. And so it makes it easier and certainly more affordable for the city to add more sidewalks throughout our community. Certainly with Lock 4 Road, that would probably be a large challenge, but maybe worth the effort of neighbors working together to agree to help us come up with a long-term solution. So I appreciate that question. I agree with you entirely. It is a very dangerous road to walk or ride a bike on.
Thank you, Mayor. That leads us very well into our next question, which is from Susan. I'm sorry if I butcher your HODIS. Okay.
Yes. Hi.
She has asked specifically about if new homes in Gallatin are charged an impact fee. And I believe there was a couple other questions in this queue that talk about fiscal impacts of development. And I know this is something that's important to what we do. And Michael, do you want to talk a little bit about how your role at GNRC or with this plan is going to help the city determine what some of those impacts are and find new creative and innovative ways to finance the infrastructure we need?
Yeah, I think there's three parts to this question, and maybe Josh, you take the first one just in terms of clarifying the pre-existing impact fees that are out there now on developers. I don't believe that's the case for the city of Gallatin, but I'm going to let you answer that since you'll have a more accurate answer to that.
So the city of Gallatin does not currently have a residential home impact fee. The county does have, it's not classified quite as an impact fee, but there is a
Adequate facilities tax.
yes, adequate facilities tax. I couldn't think of the word. That
And who pays that tax?
So that is paid by builders of new residential homes,
Okay,
and that's paid to the county. When they, in the city limits, we get proof that they've paid that impact, or paid that fee to the county.
okay.
So I'll take it from there, because if you are a city and you're not already levying your own impact fee, then it's likely you're not allowed to under state law. The practice of impact fees was prohibited, several years ago, but there were some communities, city of Franklin, for example, who were grandfathered in with special legislation. But I think it's an important thing for us to reconsider, not to suggest that, you ought to be doing it in the city of Gallatin, but I think the bigger your toolbox to address infrastructure needs and to sort of manage growth requires that you have an honest conversation about that. One of the roles that we provide at GNRC is that, if it were the will of our local communities to want to explore impact fees, either as a financing mechanism for the cost of infrastructure that's being necessitated by specific development, because that's what we're talking about here,
Right.
or to manage growth. And then if it's their will to kind of explore that with the Tennessee General Assembly, I mean, that's one of the roles that we would play, is to coordinate that conversation regionally and then bring that to the attention of our state legislature, to open that door up again. I think, if we do that, I think, we have a pretty fiscally conscious group of mayors across Middle Tennessee. I think they'd want to do that with some safeguards for their residents. But I think it's an important thing to have an honest conversation as we go through this process. Some of the tools that I mentioned this evening could be useful to see how an impact fee may be beneficial, without making any indication myself as to whether or not you should pursue it. Hopefully that gets at your question.
Because my concern is that with the growth in Tennessee, in fact, I'm part of your growth. I'm from Chicago. Is that as the community grows, our schools are so overcrowded now. How does that get paid for?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And some communities,
so they'll come back to the taxpayers.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
I understand the growth. I come from Chicago. I understand it. But I think that, in fact, even in the area that I live, I understand that a new development is planned to come in that'll be 400 houses. Berry Road can't take the strain.
Yeah. Now, I like to.
How do we address that?
Well, and for those of you, I mean, we're all a little bit leery of taxes and fees. I don't think anybody on this call is like, yay, more taxes and fees. But I think, the way I think about it personally, think about your retirement account, right? You really want a diverse portfolio of options so that you're kind of sustained and well protected into the future. Recessions really impact traditional sources of revenue like sales tax. So just diversifying that will ultimately reduce the burden on everything else and also insulate you from vulnerability into the future. So we're going to be around to have that conversation with you. What else you got, Josh?
Michael, we've got a special guest on the line who's been hiding, and that's James Fenton with the Gallatin EDA. James, your line's unmuted. If there's anything you'd like to add.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The conversation surrounding an impact fee is one that is actually has been front and center in my economic development career. Before I came to Gallatin, I was in Cheatham County, and they were featured actually in the New York Times for having the highest impact fee in the nation. It was $7,500 per house, and it actually down all development. And there was like 3 years there where not a single house was built. They have since reduced tremendously, but I agree there is an impact fee. I think we have that adequate facilities tax right now. that is a per square foot, and it goes directly to the schools, which I am completely supportive of. For those of you that don't know, all of my degrees are in education. I have taught. I have been an administrator. I've done, at the university level. Education is near and dear to my heart, and so I'm totally supportive of those fees going into education. We are in a really unique position right now where we are one of the stronger. Our economy is one of the stronger ones in Middle Tennessee right now, and we may be able to do something that could increase that slightly. I think we just need to be very, very careful because it has a direct impact on the amount of development coming in. Now, we are growing, as Michael pointed out, at 200 people a month. A couple of years ago, University of Tennessee put a study out. We are the fourth fastest growing city in the state, behind Murfreesboro, Clarksville, Nashville, and it was Gallatin as far as pure numbers of people moving here. That has slowed down since then, and which is not a bad, but we're still very, very healthy. We need to look at that. We need to address it. We just need to keep in mind that it does have the ability to just completely stop what's going on in the community. Right now, we're in a very good position. And the adequate facilities tax is contributing greatly to our school system. Let's just keep all of it in mind. That's what this conversation is about tonight, is making sure that we're doing the right things for our community. Susan, we need to. There's an opportunity, maybe. We do have one now. It's not called an impact fee. It's an adequate facilities tax. And as Michael indicated, it does have to go through state legislature. Nashville just this week announced they wanted to put an impact fee, but they have to go through state legislature to get that done also. It could be a complicated process, but it's worth looking into. I think we're in good stead right now here in Sumner County, but that's open for conversation. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad to hear that you are an educator. I'm a substitute teacher in Sumner, and I want the best for the kids in the community.
Me too.
Thank
All right.
you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Michael, I think we may not have time to get to all of the questions. There's a lot of great questions from a lot of people. There's a lot of questions about infrastructure. That might multimodal infrastructure, both with vehicular traffic and with multimodal. But I think one of the larger overarching questions has been with the scenarios. You're currently showing sort of the business as usual model and the compact growth scenario. Can you talk a little bit more about how, based on the input from the public, where we would find ourselves within those two scenarios that are currently being looked at?
Yeah, I think the first opportunity sort of point the city into a direction that you like is through that plangallatin.org/survey, where you could kind of weigh in on what you thought about this issue we talked about tonight. We're asking you in a couple of different ways. Because it's not as simple as saying, let's do compact growth. I mean, the idea is how do you glean the benefits from compact growth, the benefits that it provides, and do that in the right areas. And that's really the tough part of the conversation, is where do you allow that density in order to gain the benefits that come from it. So I think your feedback through that survey is going to be setting up the roundtable sort of small group discussions that we've got planned for you in the coming weeks. As to where you end up, Josh, that's for you to say.
And by me, we really mean the residents of the city of Gallatin.
Yeah, you plural as the community.
We're involved in the development of this plan hand in hand with GNRC as the city planning staff. And we're very interested in getting the feedback from the public and getting all of the information and all the impacts of the different growth scenarios out to all the members of the public. so that we can all collectively make an informed decision
John,
about
let me,
what's. Go ahead, Michael.
There. I think one of the underlying questions that I might just volunteer now, just food for thought, because I'm sure it's either in the Q&A or on somebody's mind, is a lot of times, we present this data and somebody says, well, how is congestion better with the compact growth scenario? That doesn't make any sense. Got more people and jobs in a smaller footprint. How does that make congestion better? Well, the reality is, as we think about congestion, a lot of times we get trapped into thinking about this that moment in time that we're sitting behind that car in front of us and not moving, or we're going slower than we want. And the reality is, like, that's ultimately not going away altogether. Like, that's going to likely get more common into the future. But what the compact growth development does is it restricts that congestion in the key areas that you could then provide other options to getting around. And the trips are going to be shorter in those areas. And so even if you are stuck in congestion, the distance of that congestion is going to be shorter, and your travel through that is going to be shorter. So the amount of time you're actually losing in that congestion is not nearly as great as it would be if you're having to travel very far. And what we know about congestion, at least half of the congestion that's out there on the roadways, it's a direct product of the amount that we're driving in Middle Tennessee or within the city of Gallatin. We as a region, we drive some of the longest distance to get to work, to get to school, to go shopping, than pretty much any other place in the country. And as a result, we're on the roads a lot. And we're competing for that limited roadway space with each other for long periods of time. That's causing a lot of the congestion that you're seeing. Sure, there are bottlenecks and there are traffic signalization stuff that we can do, but the goal of the compact growth development is to manage where that congestion is happening and put it into places where you can walk, you can bike, you can take a transit circulator, or you can take your car and sit in the traffic, but you're not going as far as you otherwise would be required to sit in your car. So the ultimate impact on your quality of life, the amount of time it's keeping you away from your kids or grandchildren, is much less than it otherwise would have been. So it's a little bit counterintuitive, but there is a lot of logic to it the more you think about it.
So Michael, we've got a great question from Patrick Flowers. Can we review setbacks in the urban core and maybe review grandfathered zoning issues? So Patrick, your line's been unmuted. This is a fantastic question. One of the things that the city has budgeted for and that we are looking at is, upon the adoption of the Gallatin land use plan, is looking at our zoning ordinance and making updates to it to better reflect the information that comes out of the different growth scenarios and the feedback that we're collecting in this plan. And I believe the mayor turned on her video. She'd like to speak. Go ahead, Mayor.
Yes, I would. And absolutely. I mean, I think one of the most beneficial things that can happen for our city is to have opportunities for new or higher density develop in our core commercial district. A lot of people may not know this, but a lot of our downtown area is in an opportunity zone, which is an opportunity to, I guess, spawn growth in that area. And I think that that is the perfect area for really—
Wish you won't be on camera.
Huh?
I'm sorry.
You're okay. I didn't know if somebody interrupted me or not. But yes, I think that density around that core commercial district, which would take some opportunities for some new zoning that doesn't exist, and addressing things in a unique way. Because if you know me, I want to preserve our downtown, and what are the ways that we do that, and preserve the historical elements. And I happen to know that Patrick and I both live in that area. So it is an area that I'm passionate about and excited about, because I do believe that the opportunity is here. And everybody I talk to that's interested in developing in Gallatin, I'm like, what about downtown Gallatin in this area? Because I think that there really is a great opportunity for investment here, and that's going to benefit our downtown and make us a stronger community. So I love your question, Patrick. Thank you. I may have gone way a different direction than what you were asking. I was answering the question when you were asking the question.
No, that's exactly what I'm thinking about. I'm someone that moved from a rural area with 12 acres, and I live in the city core now in a high use area that was built in 1987. that all the residents absolutely love. And we're one of the few places that have an over 80% walkability score on Zillow. And I love getting in, I get in the car, drive to Hendersonville to work, and we park on the weekends, and we have everything we need close by.
Mm-hmm. I love it too. Thank you for asking that. Mr. McCord may want to chime in. I don't know. Or Josh, you?
Josh, before we get too much further and we lose our window for the Zoom meeting, I want to say that the city is going to answer every question that has been posed tonight in the Q&A grid. It may take us a little bit to answer all those questions. Some of them are similar, some of them are very specific, but we will make every effort to do that. And then we will email it to everyone who RSVP'd. We will post it on PLANGALLATIN.org and probably in some other areas as well. But stay tuned for the answers to that. We don't want to leave anyone believing that we didn't care about your question or didn't think it was valuable. Nothing further from the truth. We just may lose our window of time, as they say.
Great. Well, thank you, Rosemary. That was a fantastic sort of recap. Yes, go ahead, James.
One more thing. I would just like to add a comment to Mr. Flowers' question, which I find just zeroing in on what we want to do. The city went through a branding process 3 years ago. And one of the things that came out of that was that the downtown area was vital to what we thought of our community. And the mayor's comments feed directly into that. If we can allow for that more dense development around that city square, it makes our unique square. We have a just incredibly unique square down there, and it makes that much more viable, and it really creates more of what has attracted people to the community. And so, Ms. Flowers, I am supportive of your question. And as the mayor said, that's exactly what we're aiming for, and would love to have more input into that. Thank you.
So here's a really a great question from Beverly Staten. She asked, how has the present pandemic affect our future outlook for our planning growth? This is an excellent question. As everyone's aware, being on this meeting and being alive for the past several months, the pandemic has had a significant impact on a lot of different people, different operations. It has impacted everything that we do from the city, the way that we interact with the public, the way that we hold meetings, the way that we do just about everything has been impacted as well. Many of you has been as well. Michael, with the different scenarios, is there any data coming out from any of our usual sources that really are being able to predict or incorporate any of these changes to the way that we live, the way that we commute, the way that we consume things on any kind of growth scenarios?
Yeah, I think there is a relationship, but first let me pick on you. You're absolutely right. But one of the things that somebody says when somebody asks a question, if they say, that's an excellent question, it's because they don't know the answer to it. And that's okay, not picking on Josh, because nobody really knows the answer to that question yet. I mean, we're already looking at observations of how COVID-19 has affected travel behaviors, for example, shopping behaviors. We're seeing it real time, what's happening. No debate about that. I think what the hard part of this is trying to figure out which of those trends persist into the future. And we can only speculate at that at this point. For example, I'll speculate that work from home as a practice probably grows somewhat exponentially over the next few years, as we've demonstrated the value of that in so much of what we do. But, I don't want to speculate. I think to answer your question, Josh, because I think I can offer a glimmer here, is that if you look at the two philosophies that we described, compact versus sprawling, and again, there's no right or wrong here. You're going to have both of those exist within the city in your future, no matter what. It's the compact growth, I think, that is more complementary to some of the changes in behavior we've already seen. I think Patrick mentioned earlier, he drives to Hendersonville, but otherwise he's parked and accessing the community by foot or potentially by bike. And so if you're not commuting to work every day over a long distance, you're probably a lot more thoughtful about what is immediately around your house. And that changes the way you buy homes. You think about like the significant influence that where you work on where you decide to live. And it's a balancing act there, and you make a lot of trade-offs and compromises along the way. But if where you work no longer matters, you're going to care a lot more about what's around you. And once you enjoy the freedom of not having to use your car and you only use it as a luxury, I think it will ultimately be more complementary to the compact philosophy. But again, maybe even that's speculative, but I feel pretty certain that it's more aligned there than the other direction.
Well, thank you, Michael. Beverly, did that sufficiently answer your question?
Kind of, sort of, but I was really thinking about the, I guess the nursing homes.
Yeah. Well, just the public health element and how that continues into the future is probably the one area where I hope we don't do a lot of guessing, that we actually look at the data and sort of take that tracking seriously, because you've got the nursing homes, but even like there's an element of density that has scared people these days. Being in close proximity to folks is kind of a scary proposition. How's this going to impact public transit, which is definitely more linked to the compact road. I mean, that's a fair follow-up question, but I think when it comes to the public health side of it, I think our anxieties can be alleviated about these relationships the more we know about the virus itself.
Well, I just hope we will have, as you said, with the health organization and so forth, even we need to have a plan. Hopefully it won't happen again, but if it does, we need to be ready to know how to address it.
100%. Hey, Josh, I know we're coming up on the end of our Zoom time, so let me just congratulate everybody for doing the survey so far. I'm really impressed by the responses that are coming in. It's not everybody yet, so if you haven't done it, please do that tonight while this is fresh on your mind. And I already see a lot of people have signed up for the small group discussions. We probably are going to have to add some more options, but get them while they're available. They're going fast. So I'm just really pleased with the responsiveness tonight to the call to actions that Brad and Rosemary provided.
Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you everyone for participating in this Plan Gallatin activity. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do it in person, but we're still thrilled that we're able to engage with all the members of the public and all your various thoughts and opinions on growth and development in the city of Gallatin. Thank you again to the mayor. We have Councilman Alexander, Councilman Fennell. Thank you for helping support this department and support this initiative. Mr. Purrier, for participating and leading us in the beginning with some opening remarks, and to all the other GNRC staff and city staff that have participated to make tonight a resounding success. Mayor, do you have any parting comments for us?
No, just thank you all very, very much. And I appreciate the thoughtfulness that we're all going to hopefully have going forward. And as I said in the beginning, this is hard, but I appreciate your willingness to tackle it, and we will have a good plan, and we will have a good community as we move forward. I wish you all good night.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, everyone that's still on the line with us, the plangallatin.org/survey is where you can do some follow-up, and then sign up for one of the small group sessions. You'll be meeting with a member of city staff, at least one, and a member of GNRC staff, so that we can better engage with you on a one-to-one, and you can engage with your fellow Gallatin residents as well. So again, both of those are follow-up activities, and those will be taking place through the end of the month. And with that, everyone, have a great evening, stay safe, and thank you for participating in this Plan Gallatin event.